You are hanging above a rocky ravine, surrounded by bees. There is no steel ladder under your feet, no helmet, no modern rope, no jar of honey waiting safely on a supermarket shelf. There is only a flexible line of plant fiber, a cliff face, and something sweet hidden above you. Today, the average American adult consumes about 17 teaspoons of added sugar a day. Sweetness is everywhere. For most of human history, it was not. If you wanted concentrated sweetness, one of the richest sources available was wild honey. And sometimes getting it meant climbing. That sounds like a guess. It is not. Across eastern Spain, prehistoric artists painted people climbing toward wild bee nests using ropes, long flexible lines, and ladder-like systems. At one site called Barranco Gómez, the image is detailed enough that archaeologists can study not just what the person was doing, but the technology that made the climb possible. The surprising part is not simply that prehistoric people collected honey. The surprising part is how much engineering sat behind something that now comes in a plastic bottle. The rock art belongs to the Levantine tradition of the Iberian Peninsula. These paintings show hunting, gathering, movement, animals, and people in action. Their exact chronology has been debated, and many scenes belong to the long period after the last ice age when hunter-gatherer lifeways and early farming societies overlapped in parts of Iberia. So the safest question is not exactly what year one particular. The better question is this. What kind of technology did a prehistoric community need before anyone could hang from a cliff and reach a wild beehive? In 2023, archaeologists Manuel Bea, Dídac Roman, and Inés Domingo published a detailed study of rope use in Levantine rock art in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal. Their starting point was Barranco Gómez in Teruel, Spain. The site contains an unusually clear honey hunting scene. A human figure appears on a flexible climbing system made from a long line with repeated loops. The researchers interpret it as a stirrup ladder. Not a rigid wooden ladder, but a rope structure with loops that could support the climber's feet. The image contains 29 visible stirrups. Using the scale of the painted figure, the researchers estimated that the ladder could have been roughly 7.5 meters long. But the amount of rope needed to make it may have been much greater. Once the loops and knots are taken into account, their estimate reaches roughly 25 meters of cordage. 25 meters. That is the hidden story. Honey gathering begins long before anyone approaches the bees. First, somebody has to make the rope. Plant fibers do not arrive as finished cord. They have to be selected, prepared, combined, and turned into something strong enough to trust with a human body. The exact fiber used in the Barranco Gómez ladder cannot be identified from a painting. The researchers discuss materials such as esparto grass and other natural fibers known from the region and from prehistoric cordage traditions. What matters is the level of organization visible in the final object. A long climbing line requires raw material. It requires labor. It requires knowledge that cannot be discovered again from zero every single time. And it requires confidence that the finished object will hold together when the ground is far below. That makes a rope ladder more than a tool. It is stored information. Someone has to know which fibers work. Someone has to know how to turn short plant material into long cordage. Someone has to know how the loops behave under weight. Someone has to know how the whole structure can be transported and positioned. None of that leaves behind a stone blade. Most of it rots. That is why prehistoric rope technology is so easy to underestimate. Stone survives for thousands of years. Bone sometimes survives. Plant fiber usually disappears. If archaeologists judged prehistoric technology only by the objects that preserve well, ancient life would look much harder, heavier, and more primitive than it actually was. Rope changes almost everything. With cordage, you can bind, carry, suspend, repair, tie objects together, make nets, make containers, make traps, and, in eastern Spain, climb toward honey. Barranco Gómez is not the only clue. At La Araña, another famous Spanish rock art site, a honey-gathering scene shows a climber associated with long ropes while bees cluster around the target. The system there is different. The Cambridge study argues that the three long lines at La Araña should not simply be called a ladder. They appear to form a separate climbing arrangement, showing that prehistoric people were not using one universal design. That matters. Different problems were getting different solutions. At Arpán, researchers identify a more conventional rope ladder form, with two parallel sides connected by short crosspieces. At Cingle de el Ermita, another scene appears to show a stirrup-style ladder, again using loops rather than a rigid staircase. Across the rock art record, the same basic need produces several technologies. That is what engineering looks like before metal. Not one invention, a family of solutions. Now reconstruct the scene. You live in a Mediterranean landscape of rock shelters, steep ravines, scrub, trees, and seasonal resources. A wild bee colony has chosen a place that is difficult to reach. That is good for the bees. It is inconvenient for you. The honey inside represents a dense package of energy. It also comes with wax, a material that later prehistoric communities across Europe clearly exploited. Modern chemical studies have found the molecular fingerprint of beeswax in Neolithic pottery across a wide area of Europe, the Near East, and Mediterranean North Africa. A nature study led by Melanie Rafit-Salkay showed that human exploitation of honeybee products was widespread by at least the 7th millennium BC. The pottery residues do not tell you exactly what every vessel contained. Honey itself does not preserve easily, but beeswax does. So a material that once surrounded honey can survive chemically after the sweetness is gone. That gives archaeology two very different kinds of evidence. In one place, molecules remain inside pottery. In another, paintings show people actually going after the hive. Barranco Gómez gives you something even rarer. Behavior frozen into an image. The artist did not paint a generic person standing beside a beehive. The climber's body is positioned on the flexible ladder. The loops change shape around the person. A stabilizing element appears across the climbing system. The scene is naturalistic enough that Bea, Roman, and Domingo compared the painted arrangement with later climbing equipment. That does not mean prehistoric people had modern mountaineering gear. It means the mechanical problem was recognizable. A flexible ladder moves. A human body adds weight. A long suspended line can swing. The people who designed these systems had to deal with those realities using the materials available to them. And the rock art suggests that they did. Now comes the strange part. The most impressive technology in the scene may not be the climbing. It may be the decision to invest so much work for honey. Think about the cost. Fiber has to be gathered. Cordage has to be made. A long ladder has to be produced. The location has to be known. The hive has to be worth reaching. And the people involved have to accept a level of danger that makes a modern trip to buy honey look absurdly easy. Why? Because sweetness was different. Your modern brain lives in a world where concentrated sugar can appear at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and between all three. A prehistoric forager did not live inside that food environment. Wild honey was seasonal, patchy, and protected by insects that had every reason to defend it. That rarity changes its value. Honey is not just pleasant. It is energy that requires little digestion compared with many fibrous wild foods. It is portable for at least a limited period, can be shared. And bee products can serve purposes beyond eating. The archaeological record cannot tell you exactly how every prehistoric group divided, stored, traded, or valued each harvest. That uncertainty matters. A painting is not an instruction manual. It does not tell you what people said before the climb. It does not tell you who was considered the best climber. It does not tell you whether a particular hive belonged to one family, one camp, or whoever reached it first. But it does tell you that the activity was important enough to paint. And in the Barranco Gómez scene, important enough to paint in remarkable technical detail. That creates another question. Who made the ladder? The climber is the dramatic part of the image, so attention naturally goes to the person hanging in space. But 25 meters of rope represents hours of invisible work. Possibly much more. The people who gathered plant fibers, processed them, twisted or plaited cord, checked damaged sections, carried the equipment, remembered productive locations, and taught the next generation may never appear as the heroic figure in the painting. Yet without them, the heroic figure does not leave the ground. This is one of the biggest distortions in the popular image of the Stone Age. Ancient technology is often reduced to stones. Hand axe, spear point, arrowhead, sharp flake. Those objects survive beautifully, so museums fill with them. But a real prehistoric camp would have been full of technologies that archaeology barely sees. Cord, baskets, wooden handles, plant fiber containers, nets, bindings, clothing, mats, flexible climbing equipment. The soft technologies may have been just as important as the hard ones. A stone point can kill an animal. A rope can help turn many separate objects into a working system. That is a different kind of intelligence. At La Araña, Barranco Gómez, Arpán, and Cingle de el Ermita, prehistoric artists accidentally preserved a glimpse of that missing world. Not the rope itself, the idea of the rope. That may be even more valuable. A physical cord can tell an archaeologist what fibers were twisted together. An image can reveal what people did with it. That is why these paintings matter. They show that prehistoric humans were not simply reacting to the landscape with whatever happened to be nearby. They were designing equipment for specific problems. A cliff is a problem. A wild hive is an opportunity. Rope turns one into access to the other. And once that technology exists, the same knowledge can spread into other parts of life. Carrying, fishing, hunting, building, storage, repair, movement. The exact path from one use to another is usually invisible. But the principle is not. Flexible materials expand what the human body can do. Your hands can only hold so much. Your arms can only reach so far. Your body can only climb what it can grip. Technology extends those limits. That is the real story inside a tiny painted climber in Spain. Not that prehistoric people liked honey. Of course they did. The deeper story is that something as ordinary as sweetness could sit at the end of a chain of planning, material knowledge, labor, memory, and risk. Today, a bottle of honey hides almost all of that from you. You see the finished product. You do not see the landscape where the bees fed. You do not see the hive. You do not see the tools. You do not see the people who built the system that moved sweetness from an inaccessible place into your hands. Prehistoric rock art removes that illusion. It puts the system back into the picture. The next time honey feels like one of the simplest foods in your kitchen, picture Barranco Gómez. A rock wall. A cloud of bees. A human figure suspended on loops of fiber. And behind that figure, meters and meters of rope that somebody had to know how to make. You are hanging above a rocky ravine, surrounded by bees. But now the most remarkable thing is not the height. It is the ladder.